In my view, China is one of those leading actors in the global south, together with India, many other countries. And so China has been very active in South-South cooperation. It is in fact one of the most important actors in the global south. If you think about Africa, but also Latin America, Asia, through the Belt and Road program since 2013, China has been building very important infrastructure, roads, bridges, stadiums, hotels, ports, telecommunications, but not just since 2013. China was doing it even before that. China has historically had enormous logistical capacity. So to build infrastructure in many developing countries, there's no other actor, no other country that has had that logistical capacity and the finance and the willingness to construct infrastructure projects that many global north actors were not prioritizing or have not prioritized since 1960s. So for many countries, particularly on the African continent, the most important actor to build roads and bridges and dams and energy projects has historically now, in the last 30, 40 years, been China. China also offers something that the global north is not offering that much. China offers stipends to students, stipends to journalists, to legal practitioners, to very many, or even, diplomats or military people. So China has been very successful, in my view, in building relational power in Africa. It values personal relationships rather than just coming in, doing something, and leaving. So there's a long-term continuity of many of these projects that China is involved in. There's been, unfortunately, quite a lot of China bashing in Western media. It is very popular among some people to just criticize China. I'm not saying that China is perfect. There are many things that China can do differently. But overall, I would say that the allegation that China involves itself in debt trap diplomacy, that is incorrect. There is no evidence that China is actively going and trying to get countries into debt. If you look at a lot of the statistics, China's debt is much less than Western actors on the African continent. China does not hold most of the debt. And in some cases, there's been some very positive news. Just a few weeks ago, China canceled, I think, $20 million of debt that Malawi, the southern country, had. China has just waived that. So there's some progress happening also there. And there's another misunderstanding that China will take over some of these projects or will occupy a port or an airport that it has built if countries can't pay back their loan. That has never happened. It has not happened in Sri Lanka. It has not happened in Africa. But there are these rumors, these allegations that China is doing that, which is absolutely not true. And finally, I will have to say that there's a lot of studies, in fact, opinion polls by Afrobarometer that conducts these opinion surveys on the African continent. The Chinese model of development is actually quite popular. It is seen to be very relevant for many African countries. In my own work, but also together with my Chinese and African colleagues, we find that a lot of policymakers actually prefer the Chinese way of doing it because there's, as I said earlier, there's no other alternative. No other country is offering money or expertise to build what many of these African countries want and need, such as roads and buildings, the hard aspects of development. China has been there, but China is also expanding into health. China sends sometimes doctors and nurses for health camps in Africa, is providing, as I said earlier, education scholarships. So it's not like China is just focused on infrastructure, but that is where a lot of the Chinese companies have expertise. I think one of the most important things that China could prioritize, but not just China, many other countries can prioritize, is energy poverty on the African continent. Over 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. 900 million people rely on biomass as, firewood and charcoal for their energy needs. Because without electricity, it is very difficult for many of these countries to grow. For jobs is the most important aspiration for African citizens. And if one could make sure that there's reliable, affordable electricity generation and access, then it would make a huge difference to the African continent. So going forward, it is going to be clean, green, and beautiful as the Belt and Road has sort of been reformed and reshaped. But I hope and I really, really expect that China, together with many other countries, can partner to make sure that most African businesses and people can have more improved access to electricity.